History has spoken. Russia's Ukraine peace plan and the new map and security doctrine for the day ahead. Why the Russian side is not waging an all-out war asking for a limitation of Ukraine's territorial sovereignty and security guarantees. Relevant articles. U.S. experts, CSIS, dispel U.S. delusions. Russia will never run out of missiles. A crushing blow is coming for Ukraine. Russia placing tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus does not violate the treaty. July 1st news. And Russia, as a modern historian has pointed out, often talks to history about shaping a universal future while its past is constantly under negotiation. The Russian side informally still submits a roadmap for peace in the Ukraine, but also the new geopolitical principles that will shape a multipolar world, posing the question to the international community, what will be the future of Ukraine after the guns stop talking? After all, the next war is expected to be fought through diplomacy. And behind the scenes, at the recent conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine in London, the general discussion was about the upcoming negotiations that will take place at some point anyway. In fact, this may already be happening behind the scenes. The recent talks held in mid-June between Russia, China, and the US, hosted by Washington in Cairo, Egypt, on nuclear non-proliferation may be only the beginning of wider talks and may even have covertly begun the related discussions. But what would the reconstruction of Ukraine look like after the military operation that began February 24, 2022? The Russian briefing website, which echoes the Kremlin's views on the geopolitical changes put in place, presents the Russian Federation's roadmap for ending the conflict, setting out its demands for the next day and the new geopolitical balances. The new frontier. From the Russian perspective, recent statements by Dmitry Medvedev and Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council suggest that Russia is demanding and enforcing a land border extending as far west as Lviv, which is western Ukraine, near the border with Poland. Since Russia has also moved to host Belarus with tactical nuclear weapons, this means that much of what is now northern Ukraine would also be part of a wider zone of sovereignty in order to better protect the southern part of Belarus. There have also been negotiations and debates over whether Belarus could eventually become part of Russia itself, something that would fit in with the geopolitical agenda championed by Russian President Vladimir Putin, and on which he has built international alliances with a stronger China. Kiev would remain the capital outside the Russian sphere of influence, but would have to ensure that Ukraine's policy remain aligned with Kremlin's security interests to avoid any further friction in the future. In the east, regarding the regions of Donbass, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, each new border will be formed along the Dnieper River. This border line continues south, with Odessa passing into Russian hands, and the border with Ukraine to the west being placed in Transnistria, already a de facto part of Russian territory. The new region, the new regime of Ukrainian sovereignty. It should also be recognized that this scenario does not represent a total Russian victory, which was not at any point Russian targeting. This would mean that the whole of Ukraine would fall under Moscow's rule, the position text points out. This scenario recognizes the existence of the Ukrainian sovereign state, albeit in a limited form, that does not challenge the security doctrine of the Russian Federation. And there are reservations about the performance of said sovereignty regime in terms of security guarantees. The map is not intended to record the definite solution of the Ukraine, but it's intended to spark some international multilateral debate. For example, there are many issues that compromise this solution. The thorns in the proposed solution. First, Poland has some claims on Ukrainian territory and can participate in negotiations under the auspices of the EU security doctrine principle to move its border eastward to obtain new border in Lviv with Russia. In other words, Poland is claiming regions of Ukraine. Ukraine has already protested the Polish plans for parts of its territory, but the historical claims have factual basis, despite the agreement between Warsaw and Kiev. Parts of western Ukraine were Polish up to the beginning of the Second World War. Second, the new Russian sector under a negotiated redrawing of Ukrainian border could actually qualify as a neutral zone rather than the sovereign part of mainland Russia itself. There is some precedent with demilitarized zones existing between China and Pakistan, Iraq and Kuwait, North and South Korea, and in the late 1960s between North and South Vietnam. European military power and trade-offs for Ukraine. How to manage and monitor the security regime in these zones is a matter of under negotiation. An EU military force whose presence would be guaranteed by Germany, France, and possibly the United States might be a response should a NATO presence be seen as threatening to Moscow. Of course, this means that Ukraine, in terms of its territorial area, will shrink significantly as a result of this military defeat. However, the fact remains, albeit an inconvenient reality, that some parts of Ukraine, especially in the east, would prefer to be part of Russia anyway. This is why the conflict has been going on in the Donbass region since 2014. So, what does Ukraine get in return for ceding parts of its territorial territory? As in any peace negotiation, various international treaties may be concluded and new doctrines of collective security may be developed. First, a new Ukraine could join the European Union. Second, the $281 billion of frozen Russian assets could be negotiated with Russia and allocated to the reconstruction of post-war Ukraine. Since the money is out of Moscow's reach anyway, and the central bank has written it off its books as irretrievable for the time being, the assumption that a deal can be reached on this issue is reasonable. Then there is the recently expanded and significant new Ukrainian diaspora, with around 8 million Ukrainians abroad, and the fact that they are not expected to return in the near term. This is still a large potential source of revenue for the country. A smaller reconstituted Ukraine without border conflicts would lead to a return to development, which will be impossible to achieve in the current state of affairs. It remains to be seen what the final result will be and how it will shape up. However, a reconstruction of Ukraine, as indicated, would at least remove the obstacles of conflict and usher in a new regime of security and development for the Ukrainian people. Volodymyr Zelensky's insistence that all territory must be reclaimed looks increasingly impossible and dangerous for his own country, and although an unlikely scenario will require years of futile sacrifice for the Ukrainian people in the long run, it should also be noted that Zelensky cancelled the 2024 presidential election scheduled in Ukraine and used the ongoing conflict to indefinitely delay any democratic debate on ending the conflict. This is problematic as it denies the Ukrainian people any collective voice as to how they feel about ending the conflict. On the contrary, the war confrontation is perpetuated. Zelensky and his policies are responsible for the perpetuation of hostilities. So it's turned into a dictatorship, as you can see. Something must be done to break this deadlock, and retreat remains an honorable decision even after a bloodied struggle, the Russian side points out. What was Russia taught? The situation was also a lesson for Moscow. Ordinary Russians don't want to see their sons go to another front and a new military operation, but not this one, but would likely cause social unrest in Russia and raise the possibility of serious international regime change conspiracy, such as the ones he's used to, and the West with the color revolutions. It will not happen in this particular case, but President Putin is not willing to fall into this trap and is seeking a peaceful solution to a long-term horizon. This is from Banking News, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.